Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Save the Human Mind. Today, we'll explore a surprisingly powerful concept known as the Overton Window. This model shows us how ideas that once seemed extreme can gradually become part of the social norm.
Chapter 1. What is the Overton Window?
The Overton Window, defined by activist and sociologist Joseph Overton, describes a process by which public opinions can be shifted, making previously unacceptable ideas acceptable. This movement is not done through direct brainwashing, but through subtle and often unnoticed techniques of mental manipulation that change public perception.
Chapter 2. The evolution of a taboo in the Overton Window.
Now let's explore how the Overton Window, a social engineering theory, allows social perceptions on topics once considered unthinkable to be transformed. Take the case of cannibalism. How can such an extreme practice become socially accepted? Through a series of strategic phases, even the unthinkable can be normalized.
Phase 1. From unthinkable to radical.
It all starts when an extreme concept is introduced in scientific or cultural contexts, not as a practice to adopt, but as a phenomenon to study. This helps reduce the shock barrier and start a conversation. For example, academics might hold lectures on ancient and isolated practices of cannibalism, presenting them as part of an anthropological study. This does not justify the action, but introduces the idea in a safe context for intellectual discussion.
Phase 2. From radical to acceptable.
Once the taboo loses some of its initial impact, the media begin to cover it more frequently, shifting attention from historical or isolated practices to debates on individual rights and personal freedom. Movies, documentaries, and talk shows can explore these topics, often under the light of, what would this mean for personal freedom? The subject becomes less of a shock and more a legitimate topic of discussion.
Phase 3. From acceptable to sensible.
The next step is to make the idea not only acceptable, but also rational. It is argued that recognizing individual freedom in this context might be a sign of a mature and open society. The topic could be presented as a human right, with slogans like right to personal choice. Legislation starts being discussed, pushing for regulations that protect these practices as expressions of personal freedom.
Phase 4. From sensible to popular.
When an idea becomes sensible, it can quickly become popular, especially if supported by celebrities or influencers who promote it as chic or avant-garde. Cannibalism might appear in TV series or films as a choice of positive characters, or as part of a dystopia that challenges norms to provoke thought. This not only further desensitizes the public, but makes it part of the everyday cultural discourse.
Phase 5. From popular to legal.
The final phase is the transition from a popular idea to an accepted and finally legalized policy. Lobby groups can push for legal recognition, completing the journey of the Overton Window. This does not mean that cannibalism will become legal everywhere. But in theory, the Overton Window shows how even the most extreme ideas can be normalized through these strategic steps. Through this extreme example, we see how our perception of social norms can be incredibly flexible, influenced by cultural, media, and political forces. Awareness of this process is essential for understanding how public opinions can be shaped and manipulated.
Chapter 3. Ethical and social implications.
The manipulation of public perception through the Overton Window raises significant ethical issues. The gradual transition of radical ideas until they become acceptable and then legitimate can profoundly alter the moral and cultural values of a society. For example, practices once considered immoral or dangerous can become normative, shifting the boundary of what is considered ethical. The application of the Overton Window goes beyond simple opinion change. It touches the very essence of what we consider right or wrong. When radical ideas become the norm, not only does the law change, but our morality does too. What happens, for example, when ideas like mass surveillance or behavioral control become not only acceptable, but also desirable under the justification of security or collective well-being?
Chapter 4. Defense strategies.
Defending against the subtle manipulation of the Overton Window requires active engagement at both individual and collective levels. Here are some strategies. Education and critical awareness. Critical media education is fundamental. We need to teach people not only to consume content, but also to question the origin, the motivations behind certain narratives, and who benefits from these stories. Promotion of critical thinking. Encouraging critical thinking not only in schools but in all areas of public life is essential to maintaining a balanced society. When people are accustomed to questioning and analyzing the information they receive, it becomes harder to manipulate them through gradual changes in perception. Support for diversity of opinions and sources. Supporting a plurality of voices and information sources helps counter the monolithic narrative that can emerge through manipulation of the Overton window. Having access to diverse perspectives helps us see beyond the veil of normalization of certain ideas. Understanding mechanisms like the Overton window equips us with tools to more critically and consciously evaluate the information that shapes the dynamics of our society. We invite you to carefully examine the origin of ideas and the driving forces behind proposed policies, fostering an informed and constructive debate. Join our conversation and help forge a more attentive and critical community against media and social manipulations. To delve deeper and join the discussion, be sure to follow our podcast and take advantage of the free mental resources available at zelanamajelli.com/en. Together, we can effectively counter mental manipulation and work for a society that values truth and transparency. The power to change the world resides not only in the hands of those who move the Overton window, but also in all of us, in everyday life. Every questioning, every critical conversation, every informed choice contributes to shaping the kind of society we want to live in.